Brands are how consumers talk about it.
How do these digital platforms or social media have play such a big role in empowering the voice of consumers?
I have never imagined that one day one single post can reach millions of people.
Oh my God,
just
yes.
within a second, right?
Yep.
Consumers are spending less and less time in making a purchase decision.
Yeah.
Everything happens so quickly, right? And there are a lot of impulse buys today.
One of the major reasons for impulse buying is because the consumer is Gen Z.
Consumers as numbers, figures. They shouldn't quantify human beings and cluster them into groups.
Hello everyone, welcome to the third episode of Charcha by Mithali, and today I have with me my professor from university where I did my master's. So welcome, Stephanie. Thank you for joining us at Charcha in our third episode. Joining me today is Associate Professor Stephanie Huang, who taught me integrated marketing communications during my master's degree. She brings over 20 years of teaching experience and is currently Associate Dean for Curriculum and Learning at Macquarie Business School in Sydney, Australia. She has a deep understanding of marketing strategy, particularly when it comes to choosing the right target market and truly understanding the consumer behavior. What really stood out to me during my master's degree was when you encouraged us to see consumers as not just targets, people with values, choices, and who have a real influence in the market. So I'm very excited for you to be here, and let's see how we dive into the conversation of how consumer is the king of the market.
Thank you very much, Mithali, for this very kind introduction. Thank you for having me here. I look forward to having a conversation with you.
Amazing. We know that traditionally businesses existed, and that's why we say consumer is the king, because they've got an impact. But today the relationship has evolved and it's more dynamic and active. So in 2025, what does consumer is the king, the phrase means, and how would you define this in today's world as brand shapes consumers? Do consumers shape brands as well? Is it even more? How is the relationship, evolving? Because I've seen that how Starbucks came to Australia and it was a very difficult market for them, and then they walked in, they walked out because the problems they faced due to their coffee not meeting the right target market. So yeah, we would love for you to dive deeper into this phrase of consumer is the king.
Great question, Mithali. Consumer is the king or consumer is the queen has gone through a profound transformation lately. Consumer, their relationship with brands are now becoming much more mutual, much more transparent, and much more participatory, right? Consumers, they are not just the people who buy from you, who pay for your products or services. Consumers are also co-creators. They are also co-architects of your brand's value and a brand's identity. They are influencers to other consumers, and they're also the decision makers in your brand ecosystem. So consumers are having a much more enriched role with much more power to make more contribution to brands today. I think that's a huge change in the power structure between customers and brands. Consumers absolutely are a very important source of competitiveness to brands, because they can do a lot more than just buying from you. They can bring more customers to you, they can be your brand ambassadors, they can protect you and fight for you when a brand is in a crisis and if they are loyal customers to you. But on the other hand, consumers are becoming a much more significant source of competition to brands as well, because they occupy a significant proportion of branded voice out there in the market, if not a lion's share. So if you imagine that every day, every consumer would have more than 10 conversations about brands, and 68% of consumers in a survey told us that their perception of brands would change or be influenced as a result of their experience in those branded conversations. Now you can vividly see the power and influence of consumers over other consumers. Consumers are not just contributing to brands as buyers and payers, they're also jointly shaping a brand narrative in the market.
For sure.
So we keep saying that consumers, you are what you buy, right? And this is how brands shape customers. But today, what's more likely to happen is brands are how consumers talk about it, right? So this is how consumers shape how a brand is perceived in the market through their conversations, through the narratives that they jointly develop with brands. So I think consumer is the king or consumer is the queen, that kind of statement is having a much more meaningful implications for brands. They just have to acknowledge that they are not the only owners of the brand, though on the paperwork it may look like that, right?
Yeah.
They have to acknowledge that their brands are in two hands, one by the marketers and the other by consumers. So consumers are co-architects of their brand identity. I think this is a huge change in the relationship between consumers and the brands. So that's a new layer of meaning to the phrase of consumer is the king or consumer is the queen.
Yeah, thank you for even specifying the queen word. I really, really appreciate that. It's needed in today's world. Yeah, for sure. I also believe that having so much exposure to information in the market in this today's digital world is a big contributor for consumer having the power to control the market. So yeah, consumer is actually the king or queen of the market.
Yeah, I think they are the most important storytellers for a brand. So I think brands have got a lot of job to do to make sure that you've got consumers that work together with you for the brand, not against the brand, and they can never ever understate or ignore the influence and power of consumers today.
For sure. Amazing. I think that's great. To the next question, which would be talking about how consumers in this digital world have used platforms such as TikTok, Instagram, review platforms such as Trust Index, you know, to have a voice and come out with that voice and, you know, to influence their opinions, which takes me back to 2022, where there was a big conversation about Instagram not being Instagram anymore, where the reels came in and everything, and then there were big influencers such as Kylie Jenner and you know, Kim Kardashian. They were coming out and speaking upon that, oh, we want Instagram back. And I think it's a very big move from the CEO of Instagram that he comes in and he addresses the problem that comes in with these at the end of the day, Instagram is a product, right? The CEO himself coming up and talking about, hey, this is sorry, if this is a glitch, if this is something that's happening, hey, this is a new update that we've got. So addressing the consumers with what their problem is through these digital platforms, and obviously consumers coming up on these digital platforms and expressing their opinions. So I think this is a very, again, a transparent, a co-creation and a value generation environment where consumers come in. So I would love to know your thoughts on how do these digital platforms or social media have play such a big role in empowering the voice of consumers?
It's such a great question. I mean, it's always phenomenal to me to see the penetration of these social media, not just into one generation, but across generations. So basically everybody is using that. So I think these digital platforms or social media have absolutely revolutionized the way that consumers interact with brands. It has hugely empowered consumers with unprecedented power for them to demand accountability from brands, to shape brand narratives through their daily conversations or posts, and also to become a really great contribution to help brands to deliver better value to the market because of their influence over other consumers on this kind of social media. So this is really phenomenal to see. I have never imagined that one day one single post can reach millions of people just within a second, right? And I have never imagined that one day one single viral post can make or break a brand. So everybody can be, if you choose to be, a micro-influencer with the power that social media have created for you, I think this is really a kind of new era for both consumers and the brands. The influence is there, and out of this kind of social media and digital platform is the production and the popularization of online brand communities, which do have another layer of power to convert individual voices to collective influences, right? So, and it goes beyond boundary. It goes beyond any geographic boundary. Yep. Consumers in one part of the world can change the trends globally or in the other part of the world, right? Yeah. So social media have broken a boundary.
I totally agree that with you. Now we've been talking about consumers a lot. Now I would love to empower the brands. So being a marketer myself, I give all the power to consumers because I know they can break or make a brand or break or make the market itself. So with consumers holding more power, and what are some of the strategies that brands can come out to establish a better connect with the consumers? Because I believe that building a long-term trust and loyalty is a very big part of this environment, of this age, because as we were talking about the consumers coming in and then having such a big power over social media, they can reach anywhere in the world. So what is something that brands can do to establish that connect with them and, you know, make consumers feel empowered, but at the same time the brands can be empowered themselves?
This is really a great question. I think we are in a very different era. Trust is never as important as it is today. This is a very much like a crisis-rich environment, and that's why trust becomes such a valuable currency for all the brands. But it can't be built sort of overnight, right? So, and the reality may not be in our favor. I mean, it may not be in the favor of brands because we've got data showing that there's a kind of phenomenon called a trust dissolution that is taking place. 88% of the consumers, according to the EY Future Consumer Index report, said that they need trust to make purchasing decisions, yet only 17% of the consumers trust brands, right? So it's absolutely fading away among consumers, and we're also seeing a sort of intensified sort of brand parity among consumers, that consumers tend to be less interested in noticing or knowing or learning the brand distinctions and how this brand is different from other brands, and they're not curious to know about that, and as a result they're more likely to see different brands being similar to each other. So the implication here is probably the brand itself is no longer shortlisted as a key decision-making factor for these consumers when they make a decision about which brands to go for, right? This is the reality we're facing right now. So it's even more important and strategically important for brands to think about how to build trust, how to build loyalty among its customers. I feel like that building trust means that brands need to go beyond transactional relationships.
Yeah.
You need to think about how to build genuine, long-term emotional connections with consumers. Now, when it comes to brand, consumers usually make two decisions. One is purchasing decision, the other is loyalty decision, right? Whether I want to stay on with the brand, whether I want to go back and purchase more from the brand. Now, if you look at the decision-making model today, consumers are spending less and less time in making a purchase decision.
Yeah.
Everything happens so quickly, right? And there are a lot of impulse buys today. But when you look at the decision-making process for loyalty, the journey is actually becoming longer, meaning that consumers are taking more time to really be sure that they want to be loyal, or it's going to take longer time for brand to confidently build loyalty amongst customers. Now, loyalty will not come easily. It's a result of a good post-purchase experience that consumers, after they purchase your products, would enjoy your products or would enjoy your service. They would become advocates for your brand if they enjoy that, and then they feel the bonding with your brands. So what that means to brands is their job as a brand doesn't stop once the transaction is complete. Their job goes a much longer way to make sure that they are accompanying consumers along this post-purchase experience. They need to make sure that they create and deliver enough opportunities for consumers to enjoy what they offer, to become an advocate for them, to build the emotional bonding with them, before finally they might be able to see some loyalty being built. So it's really a long journey. It takes a lot of courage, efforts, confidence, and most importantly, strategic thinking to that. So I think to build trust, it means that brands need to take a view of long-term relationships. They need to think about building genuine, authentic engagement with consumers. They really need to listen deeply to consumers, and they need to respond with empathy and actions.
Yeah, for sure. Sorry, just going back to a point wherein you were talking about consumers being more impulsive. And then I was reading this report the other day when I wanted to prepare for the podcast. I was reading this report from McKinsey, Consumer Report 2025, very recent. So one of their main points was today's consumer is Gen Z. Like, it is the consumer your brand wants to focus on, because this is the consumer who's going to take is the consumer of the hour, because they're growing, and then further they're going and buying things. And even the luxury goods or the expensive things, the major portion of these luxury goods are bought by Gen Z. So I think one of the major reasons for impulse buying is because the consumer is Gen Z.
I think it's very true that the demographics of consumers definitely have a say in terms of what behaviors they would engage in. The younger generation is very much known for being impatient as customers, right? So they can't wait. If they want something, they want to get it. When they see it, when they want it, they want to buy it immediately. They can't wait. So if there's a no function for purchase on the social sort of commerce websites, whatever it is, and don't expect these people to get back to you and click that order button, no matter how much they love it when they see it, right? Because they simply cannot wait, and it's now or never. This is particularly true for younger generation. And another sort of emerging pattern that we've observed among younger generation is they feel less attached to anything. And there's a very strong sort of self-awareness among the younger generation, and they don't want to have their identity expressed by any single fixed brand. So they are like adventurous type of consumers. They want to try different things, and they want to be everywhere, and they want to be knowledgeable about everything that is happening in the marketplace, and they want to lose out on any social conversations. They don't want to lose out on any trends. So as a result, they feel less attached to any single brand. They feel less attached to any single product because they're always exploring. They're always curious to try something different, right? So you're absolutely right that the demographics of consumers sometimes give us a lot of power to understand why they behave in the way that they behave. So, and we do see a lot of differences across generations, across different sort of consumer segments.
For sure. Thank you for that. So, okay, this is very interesting to understand that in today's environment, consumers are also very concerned about their privacy. So in the era of personalization, customization, consumers are they also have a fear of their data getting leaked, and having a concern of they want the personalization, but at the same time they want to make sure that the data is not leaked. So in this era of personalization and customization, do consumers feel more empowered or overwhelmed by the targeted marketing that brands do? Or is it something that we see happening more in the future?
I think there's a fine line between feeling empowered by personalization versus feeling overwhelmed by personalization.
For sure.
And the definitive force in that boundary, in that kind of fine line, is whether or not the tailored message, whether or not the tailored recommendation is relevant to consumers. I think relevance is the key thing. Consumers feel empowered when the personalized offerings are relevant to their interest, are under good control, are offering extra value to them. So for example, I don't mind at all if Spotify makes recommendation of new songs that I can add to the playlist, because I always find that its recommendations are very accurate. They align very well with my usual favorites, my usual preferred style of music, etc., right? I think this is so convenient for me because it will save me so much energy and time to browse the new releases and handpick songs to be added to my playlist. So I think this is a very typical example when I feel empowered by personalization, that whatever recommendation the brand has personalized for me aligns perfectly well and reflects very well about what I'm interested in. But I would feel really overwhelmed when I receive a sort of personalized advertisement to sell a property, right? Or to sell a market report for properties, which is absolutely out of my interest, right? And I feel like it's very vague about why you sent me this. I would question whether my privacy of data would have been breached because the information provided, the personalization provided, is not relevant to my need. And this is where consumers would feel fatigue of having such kind of overreach by marketers, by brands, with this kind of personalization thing. And if that's the context of that kind of communication, the more personalized the communication is, the more scary it looks, right, to consumers, because they have no idea how come you will find me with such irrelevant offerings. So I think relevance, control, value, these are some of the standards and criteria brands need to think about when it comes to personalizing the services, products, or messages to consumers. But it also means that brands should personalize their offerings not just by algorithms, but also by empathy. They shouldn't see consumers as numbers, figures. They shouldn't quantify human beings and cluster them into groups, right? And calculate what they want with algorithms. Yes, we need some technology help to make sure that our offers are accurate, our message is accurate. But that shouldn't be the only thing you do. You should also put your insights, you should also put your empathy to these people to make sure that they would appreciate what you do. And that's how you build trust, or that's how you make your offerings, make your brand trustworthy among your consumers.
Very interesting. How can you show a consumer that you've got empathy for them? Like, that would be very interesting to know.
Yeah, I think a very important thing is about what data brands are collecting. I know that a lot of brands are collecting a lot of behavioral data, right? So the data tells you how much money consumers spend, how much time they spend on that part of the website, and what is the messages that they would read for 3 minutes, 1 minute, 30 seconds, whatever. These are all the behavioral data, right? But behaviors are outcomes, or they are results of how consumers interact with environments, with context. So what is missing probably in the data structure for a lot of brands is the contextual data, right? And in a context, you need to understand when does that take place, for what purpose, right? And who are the people that you're trying to reach out to? Who are the people that you're trying to influence? And which stage of life cycle are they in? And how do they prefer to interact with others? You know, this kind of human-related contextual information, I think that should be incorporated into the interpretation of the behavioral data so that brands can have a complete picture about who is doing what for what purpose, right? So I think to complete the data structure by combining contextual data to have a full interpretation and a full picture about what has happened is really, really important. It's a starting point for brands to see consumers as human beings, not just as digits. You know? Yeah,
for sure. No, that was really interesting to understand. So, Stephanie, how can future marketers who are consumers themselves balance the need for consumer-centric strategies with their own vision and values? Because, you know, we have as marketers, we have a very fine line between giving consumers what they want and staying true to a brand's identity themselves. For example, if I'm owning a brand, but at the other end, I'm a consumer as well. Like, how can we achieve the correct balance to have that sustainable relationship between brands and the consumers?
This is a very interesting question. I really think that marketers as consumers themselves, this actually has put marketers in a very unique position to understand both sides with deep insights, right? Because you have both hats to play with. But I absolutely agree with you that there's trickiness to keep the balance between being consumer-centric whereas upholding brand's value and the vision. I think the first thing that all brands need to do is you need to have a very clear statement of your brand purpose, like your mission, your vision, the value that you uphold to. And then this kind of purpose becomes a filter for you to assess consumer demands, right? So when you realize that there's an emerging consumer demand for something, and the very first question you need to ask yourself before starting to respond to that is, does that align with who you are?
Yep.
Does that align with who you want to be? So your purpose statement should always be the standard or the golden rule for you to decide what to respond, what not to respond, because consumers would love to see you staying consistent to your own value, right?
So
and
true.
they don't want you to chase sort of trends when trends shift. I think a very good example here probably could be Patagonia. So Patagonia never chases fast fashion trends, no matter how much that has changed in the market. It always stays connected and true to its environmental activism, which is in the core of its brand DNA. And consumers love the brand for that particular reason, right? And that becomes so authentic, so genuine when Patagonia says that we care about environment and we try to contribute to that. We do have got a lot of data showing that consumers are much more willing to pay more for a brand that has a strong and a clearly defined purpose. Consumers have expectations for brands to contribute more to solving social problems, to fulfilling their social responsibilities, right? And they want to see brands to be genuinely and authentically engaged in these causes, in these matters, as part of the brand value, instead of keeping switching sort of strategies, and instead of just seeing brands keeping saying different things or doing different things that don't align with what it says. So I think this is a no-go area for brand, that you're focused too much on short-term win by trying to catch up with every single trend, and then you forget you've got long-term gain, which is the relationship with your customers, which is the trust, which is the loyalty. I think this is the number one strategy that I would recommend brands to follow, that develop a clearly defined value statement or purpose statement, and then really use that as a filter to decide what to respond to. Secondly, I think brands, they've got different ways to measure their success. Too often I would see a lot of brands following the measures in terms about clicks, conversion rates, profits,
the digits,
sales, right? So, but you really need to think about another way to measure your success, which should be about loyalty, which should be about advocacy you have achieved from your consumers, which could be about the growth,
the retention
of your consumer community, right? These are qualitative indicators because it does tell you consumers' preferences, their attitudes, their emotional connections with you, and that will help you to go a much longer way for your sustained success. So I think brands should be good at setting both short-term goals by following those kind of digit-driven indicators without compromising their long-term vision, that they would need to develop completely different sets of measures to measure the success in that aspect.
Amazing. I really, really loved understanding how, marketers and consumers at the same time can have a correct balance, and brands and consumers can have a sustained relationship. Thank you so much, Stephanie, for joining us. It was a great conversation.
Pleasure.
And we've learned so much about consumers and the brands, and I hope if this video reaches any of the consumers or brands, the consumers would know that what power they hold in influencing today's world, and what power the brands hold today to make the consumers be seen. So I think I loved the conversation, and thank you for being here with us.
Thank you very much, Mitali. It's a great pleasure to be here. I thoroughly enjoyed the conversation, and thank you very much for this opportunity.
Amazing. Should we do a cheers?
Absolutely.
Amazing.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Yay.